Amanda stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, wondering when she had become a stranger in her own marriage. 3 years of gentle smiles, polite conversations, and a husband who treated her like fragile porcelain, never touching, never desiring, never choosing her with his eyes the way she dreamed of being chosen. She was married but felt lonelier than ever. But that night in the kitchen would change everything she thought she knew about love. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone marries for love but lives like they're just roommates? If this story touches you and lights up your heart, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Your support is what allows us to keep bringing you stories like this, and if it was worth listening to, leave your totally worth it below. The aroma of morning coffee hung in the kitchen like every other day for the past 3 years, while Amanda watched Jackson meticulously fold the newspaper beside his empty cup. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic, always the same sequence, always the same respectful distance between them. He looked up for a moment, offered that gentle smile she knew so well, and murmured a good morning before returning his attention to the news. "It's going to rain today," he said, pointing to the weather forecast without lifting his gaze. "Better take an umbrella." Amanda nodded, absent-mindedly stirring the sugar in her coffee that had already gone cold. This was how every morning went. Conversations about the weather, practical reminders, small kindnesses that should have sounded like care, but echoed like distance to her. 3 years of marriage, and she still felt like a stranger, sitting at the table of her own home. "Jackson," she began hesitantly, "do you remember when we were dating and we'd spend hours just talking?" He finally looked at her, blinking slowly like someone awakening from a daydream. "Of course. Why?" "Sometimes I feel like we've lost that." The words came out quieter than she'd intended, almost a whisper. Jackson folded his newspaper and watched her attentively, but there was still an invisible barrier between them, as if he were analyzing her through glass. "We talk every day, Amanda. In fact, we're talking right now." She sighed, feeling that familiar stab of frustration mixed with guilt. How could she explain that talking about rain and umbrellas wasn't the same as connecting? How could she say she wanted to be touched, chosen, desired, without sounding desperate or inadequate? "You're right," she murmured, forcing a smile. "I guess I'm being silly." Jackson stood up, adjusted his tie, and walked over to her. For a moment, Amanda felt her heart race. Maybe he would kiss her. Maybe he would truly embrace her. Maybe he would finally break through that invisible barrier that seemed to exist between them. Instead, he lightly touched her shoulder, a touch as brief and ceremonial as a handshake. "You're never silly," he said with genuine sincerity. "Have a good day at work." And then he was gone, leaving only the subtle scent of his cologne and the echo of his footsteps in the hallway. Amanda remained there, her hand unconsciously touching the spot where he had placed his hand, trying to hold on to the sensation of warmth that had already disappeared. She looked at herself in the kitchen window's reflection and saw a 28-year-old woman who should have been radiant, in love, living the best phase of her life. Instead, she saw someone who felt invisible in her own marriage. Jackson was a good man, gentle, responsible, present in all practical ways. He remembered their anniversaries, brought flowers for no reason, helped with household chores without being asked. He was the kind of husband every mother would want for her daughter. So why did she feel so empty? Amanda wiped the counter with mechanical movements, trying to push away the thoughts that tormented her. Maybe the problem was her. Maybe she was being greedy, wanting too much from a relationship that already worked well in so many ways. Maybe touch, passion, and desire were dispensable luxuries when you had stability and companionship. But as she put away the cups, her mind wandered to the couple she had seen at the supermarket the week before. She had watched how the husband touched his wife's back as he passed her in the aisle, how their fingers naturally intertwined as they pushed the cart together, how he whispered something in her ear that made her laugh and blush. Simple gestures, almost imperceptible, but they communicated an intimacy Amanda desperately craved. Jackson never touched her like that, never held her as if he couldn't resist, never looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world, even when they made love, or rather when she initiated and he gently responded. It was as if he were playing a role, being polite even in intimacy. Did he not desire her? Was there something about her that repelled him? Amanda examined herself in the bathroom mirror before leaving for work. Silky brown hair, bright green eyes, a body she kept in shape. She wasn't ugly. On the contrary, she received appreciative looks from other men when she went out alone. But Jackson looked at her as if she were a beautiful painting on a wall, something to admire from a distance, but never touch. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Jackson. "I forgot to tell you I'll be home a little later today. Last-minute meeting at the office." "That's fine," she replied, trying not to sound disappointed. It was Friday, and secretly she had hoped they could do something special together. "Want me to prepare something special for dinner?" "You don't need to go to any trouble. Anything's fine." Anything. Always anything. Amanda felt a familiar sensation of weight in her chest, as if she were slowly fading away, becoming just part of the furniture in her own life. "Jackson," she said impulsively, "I love you." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I love you too, Amanda. See you tonight." He hung up and she stood there holding the phone, analyzing every nuance of that response. He had hesitated, even to say he loved her. He had hesitated, as if the words were foreign in his mouth. Amanda sat on the bed they shared every night, but where they never really seemed to meet. It was a large, comfortable bed with soft sheets and fluffy pillows. It was also the place where she felt loneliest in the world. And as the silence of the house enveloped her like a heavy blanket, Amanda wondered if it was possible to die of emotional starvation while being married to a good man. The question echoed in her mind like an omen. What happens when love isn't enough if it doesn't come with desire? And more importantly, was there any hope for change, or was she condemned to live as a stranger in her own marriage forever? Amanda still remembered every detail of that night 3 years ago, when she had carried hopes so grand they seemed capable of illuminating the entire honeymoon. The hotel room had an ocean view, rose petals scattered across the white comforter, and chilled champagne waiting in a silver bucket. It was the perfect setting for what should have been the beginning of a new phase, not just as husband and wife, but as true lovers. She had chosen her lingerie as carefully as she had chosen her wedding dress, delicate ivory lace that highlighted her summer golden skin. In the hotel bathroom mirror, she admired herself one last time before coming out. She was beautiful, felt sensual, and finally it would be just her and Jackson, without the curious looks of wedding guests, without ceremony protocols, with nothing between them but the love that had united them. "Amanda," Jackson's voice came from the room, hesitant. "Are you okay in there?" "I'm coming out," she replied, her heart racing like a teenager's on a first date. When she opened the door, Jackson was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in his dress shirt and pants, nervously fidgeting with his hands. He looked up when she appeared, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw something different in his gaze. Admiration, maybe even desire. But as quickly as it appeared, it faded, replaced by that respectful and distant expression she knew so well. "You're beautiful," he said, but the words sounded more like a polite observation than the hungry whisper of a passionate groom. Amanda walked toward him slowly, hoping that proximity would break the invisible barrier that always seemed to exist between them. "Jackson," she murmured, touching his face gently. "We're husband and wife now." He nodded, covering her hand with his. "I know, it's incredible, isn't it?" It was incredible, but not for the reason she had expected. Instead of the burning passion she had imagined, there was an almost formal politeness between them, as if they were playing roles in a theater production where neither knew the script very well. "Want me to turn off the lights?" Jackson asked, already getting up toward the switch. "No," Amanda said quickly, holding his arm. "I want to see you. I want you to see me." He stopped, looking genuinely surprised by the idea. "Oh, of course, if you want." If she wanted. As if her desire was a courtesy he was willing to grant, not something he shared. Amanda felt the first pang of discomfort, but pushed it away. It was their first night together. Naturally, there would be nervousness. "Jackson," she said softly, beginning to unbutton his shirt. "Relax, it's just us, you and me." He remained still while she removed his shirt, watching her with an expression that mixed appreciation with something that seemed almost obligatory, as if he were preparing to fulfill a marital duty instead of surrendering to a moment of passion. When Amanda kissed him, he responded, gently, respectfully, but without the urgency she longed to feel. His hands remained carefully positioned, never exploring, never losing control, never showing that he wanted her as much as she wanted him. "Is everything okay?" she whispered against his lips. "Yes," he replied, but his voice carried a tension that had nothing to do with anticipation. Amanda took the initiative, as she always did. She guided his hands, showed him where she wanted to be touched, whispered encouragement when she sensed his hesitation. Jackson followed her lead with the patience of a dedicated student, attentive to her reactions, careful not to hurt her, but always as if he were learning the steps to a complicated dance instead of losing himself in the music. When they finally came together, Amanda closed her eyes and tried to focus on the physical sensations, tried to find the emotional connection she had imagined. Jackson was gentle, even tender, but there was a mechanical quality to his movements that made her feel as if she were making love alone. "Amanda," he murmured in her ear, and she clung to the sound of her name on his lips like a lifeline. "Yes," she whispered back, hoping he would say something passionate, something that would transform this moment into everything she had dreamed of. Are you okay? I'm not hurting you, am I?" The question, though caring, was like a bucket of cold water. Even at the height of their intimacy, Jackson seemed more concerned about not making mistakes than about losing himself in the moment with her. "I'm fine," she replied, forcing a smile he couldn't see in the darkness. Afterward, while Jackson slept peacefully beside her, Amanda lay awake, staring at the ornate ceiling of the hotel room. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, creating silver patterns on the walls, and she could hear the distant sound of waves breaking on the beach. It should have been perfect. It was her honeymoon. She was married to a good man who loved her, and they had just consummated their marriage. So why did she feel so empty? Why were there silent tears streaming down her cheeks? She turned to watch Jackson sleeping. He looked serene, almost childlike in sleep's vulnerability. A strand of brown hair had fallen across his forehead, and Amanda resisted the urge to brush it away. Even in sleep, he maintained a respectful distance, as if there were an invisible line down the middle of the bed that he didn't dare cross. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, testing the words, trying to feel if they still had the power to heal the growing ache in her chest. Jackson didn't respond, lost in dreams that she suspected didn't include the same hunger that consumed her. Amanda got up silently and walked to the balcony. The night air was warm and heavy with the smell of the sea. She leaned against the railing and looked out at the infinite horizon where stars met dark waters. It was her wedding night, and she had never felt so alone in her life. She had married Jackson expecting that marriage would unlock a new dimension in their relationship, that the intimacy of married life would reveal a passion he might have been saving out of respect during their courtship. Instead, she discovered that Jackson was exactly the same in marriage as he had been while dating. Gentle, respectful, caring, and emotionally unreachable. The difference was that now there was no longer the excuse of, "Let's wait until we're married." Now they were husband and wife, and still she felt like she was bothering him when she showed desire. A lone seagull flew over the balcony, its cry echoing in the silent night. Amanda identified with that sound, a desperate call into the void, hoping for an answer that might never come. When she finally returned to bed, Jackson had turned to the opposite side, leaving a cold space between them that seemed to symbolize everything that was wrong. Amanda lay down carefully, taking care not to wake him, and remained there in the darkness, wondering if this would be the reality of all the coming years of her life. And as the sound of waves lulled her toward restless sleep, a question haunted her thoughts. Would it be possible to learn to love without being loved with the intensity her heart cried out for? Or would this emotional hunger eventually consume her completely? The months dragged by like pages of a book Amanda read without interest, each day a repetition of the one before. Jackson continued being the exemplary husband any woman would envy. He brought coffee in bed on weekends, remembered to buy her favorite shampoo, never forgot to ask how her day had been. But it was precisely this courteous perfection that was slowly corroding her soul. One Saturday morning, while they walked through the mall doing routine shopping, Amanda observed a young couple in the food court. They couldn't have been more than 20, sharing a milkshake with 2 straws like in an old movie. What caught her attention wasn't the romantic cliché, but the way he played with a strand of her hair while they talked, how their knees touched naturally under the table, how she laughed and he pulled her closer, planting a spontaneous kiss on her neck. "Amanda, are you listening to me?" Jackson's voice brought her back to reality. "Sorry, what did you say?" "I asked if you prefer regular detergent or concentrated." He held 2 packages, patiently waiting for her answer. "Detergent." They were discussing detergent while she watched other people live the kind of passion she could only dream of having. "Either one," she murmured. Jackson observed her with that worried expression she knew well, the same one he used when she dropped something or seemed tired. "Are you okay? You seem distant today." "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." Later at home, while Jackson meticulously organized the groceries in the cabinets, Amanda locked herself in the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. 3 months of marriage and she was already feeling invisible. She had gained 4 pounds, not much, but enough for her clothes to feel a little tighter. Was that why? Was that the reason Jackson never initiated physical contact? That night, she decided to conduct a test. She put on the red nightgown she had bought especially for their honeymoon, brushed her hair until it was silky, and waited for Jackson in bed with a book in her hands, trying to look casual. When he entered the room, wearing the striped pajamas he had religiously worn for 3 years, his eyes quickly passed over her before fixing on his own reflection in the mirror while he brushed his teeth in the bathroom. "Good choice of reading," he commented, pointing to the novel she was holding. "I heard it's very good." Amanda lowered the book, letting the nightgown reveal more of her neckline. "Jackson, don't you want to talk for a bit before we sleep?" "Sure." He sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "About what?" She put the book aside and moved closer, lightly touching his arm. "About us. About how you feel about me." Jackson seemed genuinely confused by the question. "How I feel about you? Amanda, I love you. You know that." "I know you love me," she said carefully, "but sometimes I feel like you don't desire me." The confusion on his face deepened. "Don't desire you? What are you talking about? We make love regularly. Regularly." The word echoed in Amanda's mind like a funeral bell. That was exactly how Jackson saw their intimacy, as something regular, scheduled, appropriate. "I know, but you never take the initiative. It's always me who starts things." Jackson was silent for a long moment, processing her words. "I don't want to pressure you," he said finally. "My mother always taught me that a gentleman waits to be invited." Waits to be invited. Amanda felt something break inside her chest. "But Jackson, we're married. You don't need to wait to be invited to kiss me, to touch me, to show me you want me." He looked genuinely lost, as if she were speaking a foreign language. I didn't know you wanted that. You never complained before." "It's not a complaint," Amanda said, trying to keep her voice calm despite her growing frustration. "It's a need. I need to feel that you choose me, that you desire me, that you can't resist me." Jackson blinked slowly, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional intensity of the conversation. "Amanda, I chose you, I married you. Isn't that proof enough?" It was a logical, rational answer, and completely devastating. Amanda realized she was trying to explain thirst to someone who had never felt thirsty in his life. "Never mind," she whispered, pulling away. "It's not important." "Obviously it's important if it's bothering you," Jackson said, but his voice carried more obligation than genuine concern. "Tell me what you want me to do." What did she want him to do? She wanted him to desire her spontaneously, to touch her because he couldn't resist, to look at her as if she were irresistible. But these weren't things you could ask for. Either they happened naturally or they had no value at all. "Nothing," she said, pulling the covers up to her chin. "Everything's fine." Jackson sat on the edge of the bed for a few more minutes, clearly wanting to say something but not knowing what. Finally, he lay down beside her, maintaining his usual respectful distance. "Amanda," he said in the darkness, "I love you. You know that, right?" "I know," she replied, and it was true. Jackson loved her, in his way, within his limitations, with whatever emotional intensity he was capable of. The problem was that his love felt like charity, like a kindness he granted her, instead of a passion that consumed him. In the following weeks, Amanda began observing other couples with an almost scientific attention. At the cafe where she had lunch, she saw husbands who stole French fries from their wives' plates with playful intimacy. At the gym, she watched men who sent messages to their women during workouts, secret smiles lighting up their faces as they typed. On the street, she noticed small but significant gestures, a hand on the lower back when crossing the street, fingers automatically intertwined during a walk, meaningful looks exchanged even after years of marriage. Jackson never did any of this. He was polite, punctual, responsible, but never spontaneous. He never surprised her with an unexpected kiss. He never sent silly messages during the day just to say he was thinking of her. He never touched her possessively or urgently. One night, lying awake beside him while Jackson slept soundly, Amanda faced the truth she had been avoiding. She had married a man who treated her like a respected companion, not like a desired woman. And the question that tormented her was whether this was enough for a lifetime. Could she learn to live without passion? Would Jackson's respectful and stable love eventually fill the void that grew in her chest each day? Or would this hunger for true connection eventually consume her, transforming her into a bitter and resentful version of herself? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, was it possible that Jackson simply wasn't capable of the kind of love she yearned for, and she would have to choose between accepting what she had or living forever feeling incomplete? It was a rainy Sunday afternoon when Amanda found herself flipping through their dating photo album, each image revealing truths she had chosen to ignore at the time. Jackson smiled politely in every photo, on their first date, at her graduation, during his marriage proposal, but his eyes never had that hungry gleam she saw in the eyes of other men in love. "Look how young we were," Jackson commented, sitting beside her on the couch with a cup of tea. He observed a photo where they were embracing on the beach. "You looked beautiful that day." "I did," Amanda agreed, but her mind was analyzing something different in the image. She was the one leaning into him, she who had initiated the embrace, she who seemed to be melting against his body, while Jackson maintained an upright, almost formal posture. "Jackson," she said slowly, "do you remember our first kiss?" He smiled, a genuine but curiously warmless smile. "Of course. At the movies after—" "What was the movie again?" "The movie doesn't matter," Amanda said, turning the page to a photo where they appeared during their college years. "Do you remember who took the initiative?" Jackson paused, clearly thinking. "Oh, I think you kind of leaned toward me, didn't you? And I responded. Always responding, never initiating." Amanda turned several more pages, each photo confirming a pattern she had refused to see at the time. In every image where there was physical contact, she was the one approaching. She who sought connection. She who seemed desperate for intimacy, while Jackson simply allowed it. "Look at this one," she said, pointing to a photo from Valentine's Day the year before their wedding. They were at a romantic restaurant, and while she looked at him with evident adoration, Jackson was focused on cutting his steak, almost oblivious to the special occasion. "I was starving that day," Jackson laughed. "Remember, we had skipped lunch." Always a practical explanation, never an emotional response. Amanda closed the album with more force than she intended. "Jackson, can I ask you a personal question?" "More personal than looking at photos from our dating days," he joked, but there was a subtle tension in his voice. "Had you ever been with anyone before me?" The question hung in the air like smoke, and Amanda saw Jackson become visibly uncomfortable. He adjusted his position on the couch, avoided her gaze, and took a long sip of tea before responding. "Why are you asking this now?" "Just curious," she lied. "We never really talked about it properly." Jackson was silent for so long that Amanda thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, almost ashamed. "Not in the complete way. There were some girls in college, but we never got to the point of making love." "Yes." The word came out as a whisper. Suddenly, many things began to make sense. The hesitation on their honeymoon, the lack of initiative, the way he treated her as if she were made of porcelain. Jackson wasn't emotionally distant by choice. He was inexperienced, maybe even scared. And before me, Amanda continued gently, did you feel desire for other women? Jackson blushed deeply, a reaction she hadn't seen in years. Amanda, I don't know if we should be talking about this. Jackson, we're married. We can talk about anything. She touched his hand, noticing how he tensed at the contact. I'm trying to understand you better, not judge you. He sighed deeply, as if about to reveal a terrible secret. It was never easy for me, feeling those things. My parents were very reserved, you know. Physical displays of affection weren't common in our house. Amanda remembered the few times she had met Jackson's parents. They were polite, intelligent people, but there was a coldness between them that she had noticed. She had never seen them touch each other. They barely spoke, except about practical matters. My mother always said that gentlemen control their impulses, Jackson continued, looking at his own hands. That respect is more important than other things. And my father, well, my father was never very affectionate. Not with her, not with me. Jackson. Amanda felt her heart tighten, not with frustration this time, but with compassion. I know I'm different from other men, he said quickly, as if wanting to end this painful conversation. I know you sometimes seem unsatisfied. I just don't know how to be different from what I am. The raw honesty of his confession completely disarmed Amanda. For months, she had interpreted his distance as disinterest, when in reality, it was ignorance. He didn't know how to express desire because he had never learned. He didn't take initiative because he had been taught it was improper. Do you want me? She asked directly. Physically, emotionally, do you want me? Jackson looked her in the eyes for the first time during the entire conversation. Of course I want you. You're my wife, I love you. But want in the sense of missing my touch, thinking about me during the day, sometimes not being able to resist kissing me. He seemed genuinely confused by the questions, as if she were describing alien feelings. I don't know if I feel things the way you're describing. Is that wrong? It wasn't wrong, Amanda realized. It was just incomplete. Jackson loved her within his limitations, in the only way he knew how to love. The problem was that she needed more, much more, than he knew how to give. It's not wrong, she said softly. It's just different from what I expected. Do you want me to change? The question came loaded with vulnerability. Do you want me to try to be more like other husbands? Amanda looked at the man she had chosen to share her life with. He was gentle, honest, stable, but he was offering to change as if it were a task he could learn, like fixing a faucet or learning to cook. And maybe that was exactly what it was. Maybe intimacy and passion could be learned, practiced, developed. I want you to be happy being yourself, she replied, but I also want us to be able to grow together, to learn together. Jackson nodded slowly as if processing a complex equation. Could you teach me the things you like, the things you want? The question, so simple and vulnerable, awakened something new in Amanda's chest. It wasn't passion yet, but it was hope. Maybe Jackson wasn't naturally a passionate lover, but he was willing to learn. Maybe the distance between them wasn't an insurmountable abyss, but just a space that needed to be filled with patience and communication. Yes, she said, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice. I could. And for the first time in months when Jackson kissed her, still hesitant, still respectful, but with a new intention behind the gesture, Amanda felt that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to each other. The question now wasn't whether Jackson could change, but whether they would both have enough patience to discover together what kind of passion was possible between two people willing to truly know each other. Amanda spent 2 weeks mulling over the conversation she'd had with Jackson, his words echoing in her mind like a mantra. Could you teach me? The vulnerability in his voice had touched something deep within her, but now she faced a practical question. How do you teach passion to someone who seemed to have never experienced it? It was a Thursday night when the idea hit her so suddenly that she almost dropped the wine glass she was holding. Jackson was in the office finishing some reports, and she was absent-mindedly browsing the internet when an article caught her attention. How couples can improve intimacy through sexual education. Sexual education. The phrase seemed foreign when applied to her marriage, but the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. Jackson had grown up in a family where intimacy was taboo, where even basic displays of affection were discouraged. Of course, he wouldn't instinctively know how to navigate the complex territory of physical desire. "Jackson?" she called, hearing his footsteps coming down the stairs. "All done for today," he said, entering the room with that tired but satisfied smile he always had after completing his tasks. "How was your day?" Amanda closed the laptop and watched him pour himself a glass of wine, his movements precise and controlled as always. "It was enlightening. Actually, I was thinking about our conversation on Sunday." Jackson stopped mid-motion, the glass suspended halfway to his lips. "Oh, not with worry," Amanda hurried to clarify. "With hope, actually. I had an idea, but I don't know how you'll react." He sat beside her on the couch, maintaining his usual distance but with his body slightly tilted in her direction. A subtle progress she noticed. "What idea?" Amanda took a deep breath, gathering courage. What if we watched some videos together? Educational videos about intimacy for adults. The silence that followed was so dense that Amanda could hear the wall clock marking each second. Jackson blinked several times, processing her words as if she had suggested they fly to the moon. "You mean adult films?" His voice was careful, without judgment, but clearly shocked. "Not exactly films," Amanda explained quickly. "More like educational content. There are couples who create videos to teach techniques, communication, ways to connect physically. It's not pornography in the vulgar sense, it's education." Jackson took a long sip of wine, clearly buying time to formulate a response. "And you think that would help us?" "I think it could help you feel more confident," Amanda said honestly, "and help me better understand what you need to feel comfortable. We could learn together, without pressure, without expectations." "Together," Jackson repeated as if testing the word. "Only if you want to," Amanda hurried to add. "If the idea makes you uncomfortable, we can forget it. It was just a thought." Jackson set his glass on the table and turned to face her completely, something he rarely did during serious conversations. "It doesn't make me uncomfortable," he said slowly. "It's unusual. But maybe unusual is exactly what we need." Amanda felt a spark of hope. "Really? Amanda, I hate seeing you unhappy. And if there's something we can do to connect better." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I want to try. I want to be a better husband to you." "You're already a good husband," Amanda said, touching his hand. "We just want to be a good couple too." That night, after 2 hours of careful research, Amanda doing searches while Jackson watched over her shoulder, occasionally pointing to something that seemed educational rather than explicit, they found some videos by a couple of sex therapists who created content specifically for couples wanting to improve their intimacy. "This one seems respectful," Jackson commented, pointing to a video titled "Rediscovering Touch: Intimacy Exercises for Couples." "Let's try this one then," Amanda said. But when she clicked play, they both tensed like students about to take a test they hadn't studied for. The first few minutes were uncomfortable. They sat with a noticeable space between them, watching the screen as if it were a documentary about an alien culture. The couple in the video spoke softly about the importance of communication, about how to create intimacy through non-sexual touch before progressing to something more intimate. "They make it seem so natural," Jackson murmured during a shoulder massage demonstration. "Because it is natural," Amanda replied, "for them, but we can learn to be natural too." When the video progressed to more intimate demonstrations, Amanda noticed Jackson moving almost imperceptibly closer to her. It wasn't a conscious decision, she realized, but an instinctive reaction to what he was seeing. "Amanda," he said softly without taking his eyes off the screen, "would you like me to touch you like that?" The question, asked with genuine curiosity rather than obligation, made Amanda's heart race. "Yes," she whispered, "I would like that." For the first time in their marriage, Jackson took the initiative. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwined, and he gently pulled her closer. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic, but it was intentional in a way it had never been before. "Like this?" he asked, running his hand through her hair the way they had seen in the video. "Like that," Amanda confirmed, closing her eyes to savor the sensation of finally being touched with purpose, with attention, with the intention of giving pleasure instead of just fulfilling an obligation. When Jackson kissed her that night, there was something different, a new curiosity, a desire to explore instead of just respond. His movements were still hesitant, still careful, but there was an intention behind them that had never existed before. "That was," Jackson began afterward, his voice loaded with surprise. "Different," Amanda completed. "Better," he said, and for the first time in their marriage, Amanda saw something in his eyes that she could call desire. Much better. Lying together afterward, with a new physical closeness between them, Amanda allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in months: optimism. Jackson might not be naturally a passionate lover, but he was willing to learn, and maybe this willingness, this vulnerability in admitting his limitations and working to overcome them, was a form of love even more precious than instant passion. The question that had tormented her for so long, whether they could find true intimacy together, had finally found the beginning of an answer. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be instant, but for the first time Amanda believed it was possible. And as Jackson fell asleep beside her, his hand still intertwined with hers even in sleep, Amanda smiled in the darkness, imagining what other discoveries awaited them on this journey of learning together. The following 2 weeks were like watching a flower bloom in slow motion. Jackson began to change in subtle but deeply meaningful ways, as if that night of education had unlocked a part of him that had been asleep for years. The morning after their first video, Amanda was making coffee when she felt hesitant arms close around her waist from behind. She almost dropped her mug, not from the surprise of the touch, but from the novelty of Jackson taking the initiative. "Good morning," he murmured against her hair, his voice still heavy with sleep but also with something new, a conscious intimacy that had never been there before. "Good morning," she replied, allowing herself to relax against his chest. For a moment, they stayed like this, swaying gently in the kitchen while the coffee dripped and morning sunlight filtered through the curtains. "This is nice," Jackson said, and Amanda could hear the surprise in his voice, as if he were discovering that casual intimacy could be pleasurable. "It's very nice," she agreed, covering his hands with hers. During breakfast, Jackson did something he had never done before. He asked directly about her desires. "Amanda, when you said you want to be touched, can you be more specific? I want to get it right." The question, so practical and Jackson-like in its approach, but also genuinely caring, made Amanda smile. "It's not about getting it right or wrong," she explained. "It's about intention. When you touch me now, I feel like it's because you want to touch me, not because you think you should." "Ah," Jackson stopped mid-bite of his toast, processing this. "So it's about wanting, not about obligation." "Exactly." They established a new routine of watching educational videos together twice a week, treating them like private lessons in a subject they were both determined to master. Jackson approached each new technique or concept with the same meticulous dedication he applied to work, asking questions, practicing, requesting feedback. "The video said to pay attention to your reactions," he said one night, his hands carefully exploring her shoulders during a massage. "Am I doing this right? Do you like it when I apply pressure here?" "Jackson," Amanda laughed softly, "you don't need to narrate everything. Just feel. Pay attention to what my body is telling you." That's when Jackson began revealing layers of himself that Amanda had never seen. During one of their lessons, he confessed that he had grown up afraid of being inadequate. "My father never taught me anything about women," he said, his hands pausing on her back. "In fact, he barely spoke to my mother beyond conversations about bills and schedules. I didn't know that marriage could include this passion, physical desire." "And now you know?" Amanda asked gently. Jackson was silent for a moment, his hands resuming their movements with more confidence. "Now I'm learning that there's a difference between loving someone and wanting someone. and that I can do both with you." The transformation wasn't just physical. Jackson began opening up emotionally in ways that surprised Amanda. He told her about how he had felt inadequate throughout his childhood, always trying to please parents who rarely showed affection. How he had interpreted being a gentleman as maintaining emotional and physical distance. How he had married her, expecting that love would be enough, without realizing he was depriving them both of true intimacy. "I thought that if I touched you too much or showed too much desire, you would think I was, animalistic," he confessed one night, his hands tracing slow patterns on her arms. "My mother always talked about men who only thought about that, as if it were the worst thing in the world." "Jackson," Amanda turned to face him, "desire isn't animalistic, it's human. It's beautiful when shared with love." The most notable change came 3 weeks after they started their education. Amanda was cooking when Jackson came home from work, and instead of just saying hello and going to change clothes as he always did, he gently pressed her against the kitchen counter, his hands on her waist, and kissed her deeply. It wasn't a polite or respectful kiss. It was hungry, almost desperate, as if he had finally understood that he could want his own wife. "I thought about you all day," he whispered against her lips, the words coming out like a confession. "During the 2 o'clock meeting, during lunch, driving home, I could only think about touching you." Amanda felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness, but from profound relief. Finally, she was hearing the words she had longed for so long. "Then touch me," she whispered back. And he touched her, with hands that had learned to explore instead of just caress respectfully, with lips that had discovered that kissing could be a conversation in itself, with a body that finally understood that desire and love weren't opposing forces, but complementary ones. That night, when they made love, it was different from all the previous times. Jackson wasn't just responding or playing a role. He was actively participating, taking initiatives, communicating his own desires instead of just trying to satisfy hers. "Amanda," he said afterward, his voice full of wonder, "I never knew it could be like this." "Like what?" she asked, nestling against his chest. "Connected, present. Like we're both really here together instead of separate even when we're close." That was exactly it. For the first time in their marriage, Amanda felt she had a true partner, someone who actively chose her every day, with every touch, with every look loaded with new intention. Jackson still had a lot to learn, and so did Amanda. But now they were learning together, as a team, with mutual curiosity and vulnerability. And for the first time since their honeymoon, Amanda fell asleep completely satisfied, knowing she had chosen the right man. He just needed to discover how to be that man. The question that had tormented her for so long finally had an answer. Yes, it was possible to teach passion. Not to create it from nothing, but to awaken what had always been there, sleeping under layers of conditioning and fear. And Jackson was awakening more beautifully than she had ever dared to hope. It was a Friday in October when Jackson did something completely out of character. He sent Amanda a message in the middle of the afternoon that simply said, "Be home at 7. I have a surprise for you." No practical explanations, no logistical details, just a mysterious instruction that left Amanda intrigued for the rest of the day. When she arrived home promptly at 7, the first thing she noticed was the smell. It wasn't just the usual aroma of cleanliness and order that characterized their home. There was something richer, more sensual. Lavender oil mixed with something that smelled like sandalwood. "Jackson," she called, taking off her shoes at the entrance. "I'm in the bedroom," came the response, but there was something different in his voice, a new confidence, almost seductive. Amanda climbed the stairs with her heart racing, not knowing what to expect. Jackson had shown a lot of progress in recent weeks, but romantic initiatives were still unexplored territory for him. When she opened the bedroom door, she stopped abruptly, her breath caught in her throat. The room had been transformed. Small candles created golden dancing light across every available surface. Rose petals, real rose petals, not the artificial ones from their honeymoon, were scattered over the freshly changed white sheets. A playlist of soft music played quietly, and on the dresser was a tray with strawberries, chocolate, and a bottle of champagne chilling in a bucket. But what impressed her most was Jackson. He stood beside the bed wearing only black linen pants, his bare torso revealing muscles she had touched before but never really observed. There was oil on his hands, and in his eyes was an intensity she had never seen, as if he had finally understood not just how to touch, but how to desire. "Jackson," she whispered, "what is all this?" "Our first real lesson," he said, approaching her with movements that were simultaneously hesitant and determined. "I want to show you that I've learned, that I can touch you the way you deserve to be touched." He stopped in front of her, his hands still glistening with oil, but didn't touch her immediately. Instead, he looked at her, really looked, as if memorizing every detail of her face. "May I?" he asked, his fingers hovering over the buttons of her blouse. The question, asked with a mixture of respect and contained urgency, made Amanda nod without being able to find words. Jackson unbuttoned her blouse slowly, his fingers brushing her skin with each revealed button. When he finished, he paused again. "You're beautiful," he said. But this time the words didn't sound like a polite observation. They sounded like worship. "Jackson," Amanda began, but he gently touched her lips with a finger. "Tonight is about you," he said. "Let me take care of you. Let me show you that I've learned to see you." He guided her to the bed with a reverence that made every cell in Amanda's body awaken. The oiled hands began at her shoulders, moving with perfect pressure that spoke of hours of research and practice. But it wasn't just the technique that impressed her. It was the intention behind each touch. "Here," he murmured, massaging a tense spot between her shoulder blades. "You always carry stress here, I noticed." He had noticed. During all those months when she thought he was oblivious to her needs, Jackson had been observing, learning her body language, memorizing her reactions. His hands moved down her back with delicious slowness, each touch communicating not just technique, but worship. When he reached the small of her back, he paused to whisper, "I love how you arch when I touch here." Amanda melted against the mattress, finally understanding the difference between being touched out of obligation and being touched out of desire. Jackson wasn't following a mental script. He was reacting to her body, letting her responses guide his movements. "Turn to me," he asked softly. When Amanda turned, she saw that Jackson was watching her with an intensity that made her blush. It wasn't the respectful, distant look from before. It was the look of a man who knew exactly what he wanted and was no longer afraid to want it. "I used to think that desiring you was disrespectful," he confessed, his hands resuming the massage on her arms. "Now I know that not desiring you was what was disrespectful. It was like I wasn't seeing you completely." His hands moved with more confidence now, exploring, memorizing, communicating through touch everything he was learning to feel. When he leaned down to kiss the curve of her neck, Amanda sighed in a way that seemed to encourage him even more. "I like that sound," he murmured against her skin. "I like knowing I can make you feel this way." The transformation was so complete that Amanda barely recognized the man who was touching her. This Jackson wasn't trying to be polite or appropriate. He was being intimate, present, completely surrendered to the moment between them. When they finally came together, it was with a connection that transcended the physical. Jackson looked into her eyes, whispered her name like a prayer, moved with her instead of simply moving over her. For the first time in their marriage, Amanda felt they were truly making love, not just fulfilling marital obligations. "Amanda," he whispered, his voice broken with emotion, "I see you. I finally see you." And she could feel it, in the hands that explored her with reverence, in the gaze that didn't turn away from hers, in the way he responded to every sigh, every movement, every accelerated beat of her heart. Afterward, as they lay intertwined among the rose petals and golden candlelight, Jackson traced lazy patterns on her skin. "Where did you learn all this?" Amanda asked, still trying to process her husband's complete transformation. Jackson laughed softly, a sound that vibrated against her chest. 3 weeks of intensive research on how to love my wife properly. I discovered there's much more to learn beyond the videos." "Much more," Amanda agreed, nestling closer to him. "Amanda," Jackson said, his voice becoming serious, "will you forgive me for all these years? For not knowing how to love you the way you deserved?" She lifted herself to look at him, seeing genuine vulnerability in his eyes. "Jackson, there's nothing to forgive. We learned together. And look where we've arrived." He smiled. Not the polite smile she knew, but a smile full of masculine satisfaction and deep tenderness. "Where we've arrived is still just the beginning," he said. "I have much more to learn about making you happy." And as the candles continued to dance around them, creating intimate shadows on the walls, Amanda knew she had chosen right. Jackson might not be naturally passionate, but his dedication to learning to be so was an even more precious form of love. The question that had tormented her for so long, whether they could find true passion together, had finally been answered definitively. Yes, they could. And they had. The months that followed that transformative night were like rediscovering a marriage Amanda didn't know was possible to have. Jackson hadn't just learned intimacy techniques, he had unlocked a version of himself that was naturally sensual, attentive, and surprisingly creative in his displays of affection. "Good morning, beautiful," became his standard morning greeting, always accompanied by a kiss on the nape of her neck while Amanda prepared coffee. These weren't empty words or automatic gestures. There was genuine intention behind each touch, each look, each whisper. One Saturday morning, Amanda woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Jackson humming in the kitchen. When she came downstairs in her nightgown, she found him preparing breakfast wearing only an apron over his underwear, which made her laugh out loud. "Is this your new cooking uniform?" she teased, hugging him from behind. "Like it?" Jackson turned in her arms, pulling her closer with a confidence that still surprised her. "I thought I could add a little more spice to our mornings." Before, she would have interpreted this as Jackson trying to be funny. Now she recognized it as genuine flirting, something he was learning to do naturally. "Lots of spice," she agreed, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him. The kiss, which started playfully, quickly deepened. Jackson gently pressed her against the counter, his hands finding the curve of her waist with growing familiarity. "The pancakes are going to burn," Amanda whispered against his lips. "Let them burn," Jackson murmured back, and the urgency in his voice, so different from the careful politeness of before, made Amanda's heart race. They didn't get to the pancakes until an hour later. The intimacy between them had become fluid, natural, full of small rituals they had developed organically. Jackson learned that Amanda loved when he played with her hair while they watched TV. Amanda discovered that Jackson melted when she traced lazy patterns on his chest after they made love. "You have magic hands," he confessed one night, while she massaged his tense shoulders after a difficult day at work. "I learned from the best," Amanda replied, remembering all the massages he had given her in recent weeks. "I was talking about the patterns you draw on my chest," Jackson said, turning to face her. "You do it every time afterward, and I've never felt anything like it. It's like you're writing secrets on my skin." The vulnerability in Jackson's confession, his growing ability to express not just physical desire, but emotional needs, never failed to impress Amanda. "What kind of secrets?" she asked softly. "That you want me, that I'm enough, that this thing between us is real." He paused, touching her face with reverence. "Sometimes I still can't believe you're my wife, that I can touch you whenever I want." "Whenever you want," Amanda confirmed, "and I hope you want to a lot." Jackson laughed, a rich masculine sound she was learning to love. "I'm discovering that I want to all the time. Is that normal?" It was such a characteristically Jackson question. Even in passion, he still approached things with intellectual curiosity, but now this charmed her instead of frustrating her. "It's very normal," she reassured him. "In fact, it's perfect." They began communicating about desire in ways they had never tried before. Jackson learned to express when he wanted her with simple but effective words. "I need you," whispered in her ear during a casual dinner. Amanda discovered she could be direct about her needs. "Touch me," said while they washed dishes together at night. One Sunday afternoon, while Amanda was reading on the porch, Jackson approached with a thoughtful expression. "Can I ask you something?" he said, sitting beside her. "Always. Before, when I wasn't like this with you, did you think about giving up? On us?" The question caught her off guard with its raw honesty. Amanda closed her book and carefully considered her response. "There were moments," she admitted, "when I wondered if I could live the rest of my life feeling invisible in my own marriage." Jackson seemed to absorb this like a punch to the stomach. "Amanda, but I never wanted to give up on you," she continued quickly. "I wanted to give up on the situation, on the distance between us, never on you. And now?" Amanda looked at the man beside her, the same man she had married, but who had transformed into someone she barely recognized, someone who touched her as if he couldn't resist, who whispered fantasies in her ear, who made her feel desired every day. "Now I know it was worth waiting for," she said. "You were there all along. You just needed to learn how to come out." Jackson pulled her onto his lap, burying his face in her neck. "I love you so much it sometimes hurts," he confessed. "And now I know how to show it." They made love right there on the porch, covered only by the blanket Jackson had brought, with the afternoon sun filtering through the leaves and creating golden patterns on their skin. It was spontaneous, urgent, full of the passion Amanda had longed for so long. "Amanda," Jackson said afterward while she nestled against his chest, "thank you for not giving up on us." "Thank you for learning to love me the way I needed," she replied. "I'm still learning," he said, kissing the top of her head. "I want to spend the rest of my life learning new ways to make you happy." And as the sun set, painting the sky gold and pink, Amanda knew she had found something rare and precious, a love that could grow, adapt, and transform. Jackson might not be naturally romantic, but his dedication to becoming the husband she needed was the most romantic thing she could imagine. The question that had tormented her for so long, whether they could find true passion together, had not only been answered but surpassed. They had found something even better, an intimacy that grew each day, fed by mutual vulnerability and the desire to keep discovering each other. And Jackson was right. They were still just beginning. Amanda noticed the first signs on a Tuesday morning when the aroma of coffee, which had always been her morning fuel, suddenly sent her running to the bathroom with nausea. Jackson found her kneeling on the bathroom floor, immediate concern etched on his face. "Honey, are you okay?" He knelt beside her, one hand supporting her forehead, while the other traced comforting circles on her back. "Must have been something I ate yesterday," Amanda murmured, but even as she said it, a suspicion began forming in her mind. How long had it been since her last period? In the following days, other signs appeared like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Tender breasts that made even Jackson's gentle touch uncomfortable, a sudden aversion to the red wine she had always loved, and a fatigue that made her want to sleep at 8 at night, even after a full night's rest. "Amanda," Jackson said on Thursday night, watching her push dinner around her plate without eating, "maybe we should schedule a doctor's appointment. You haven't been well for days." She looked at the husband who had learned to read her signals so well, who now noticed when something was different even before she did. "Jackson, I think I know what it might be." He stopped mid-motion of bringing his fork to his mouth. "What? When was the last time you remember me?" "Thus having to buy pads." Jackson blinked several times, processing the implication. His face went through a series of emotions, confusion, understanding, and then something that looked like hope mixed with terror. "You think that?" "I don't know," Amanda said honestly, "but there's a way to find out." On Saturday morning, after Jackson had run to 3 different pharmacies to buy every type of test available, his exact words, Amanda found herself alone in the bathroom, looking at a small plastic stick that could change their lives forever. 3 minutes. The test said it would take 3 minutes. Amanda sat on the edge of the bathtub, counting every second. Outside the door, she could hear Jackson pacing in the bedroom, his nervous steps creating an anxious rhythm on the wooden floor. "Amanda?" His voice came through the door. "Do you need anything? Water? Tea? I could make tea." She smiled despite her nerves. Even in moments of high tension, Jackson still tried to care for her in practical ways. "I'm fine, love. Just 1 more minute." When she finally looked at the test, Amanda felt the world stop for a moment. 2 clear, unmistakable lines stared back at her. Positive. She was pregnant. "Jackson," she called, her voice coming out as a whisper. The door opened immediately, revealing Jackson with his hair disheveled from running his hands through it, anxious eyes searching her face for clues. "So?" he asked, but she saw that he already knew from the expression on her face. Amanda held the test in her trembling hands. "We're having a baby." The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson became completely still, his eyes fixed on the test as if it were an artifact from another planet. Amanda began to worry about his reaction, or lack thereof. "Jackson, are you okay?" Slowly, as if moving through water, Jackson approached her. His hands, which had learned to touch her with such confidence, now trembled as they reached for the test. "A baby," he repeated, his voice full of wonder. "We made a baby." "Technically, yes," Amanda laughed nervously. "That's how it works." Jackson looked at her, and Amanda saw tears forming in his eyes. "Amanda, we're going to be parents. We're going to be parents," she confirmed. That's when Jackson completely surprised her. The man who for years had been careful with physical displays of emotion pulled her into his arms with a force that almost lifted her off the ground, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby," he repeated like a mantra. "Our baby." That night, Jackson planned what he called an announcement dinner, just for the two of them, but with all the ceremony of a grand revelation. He prepared Amanda's favorite dish, after extensively researching foods safe for pregnant women, lit candles, and presented her with a small pair of yellow baby shoes he had secretly bought during the afternoon. "Baby shoes?" Amanda laughed, touching the tiny soft sneakers. "When did you have time to buy these?" "I may have made a quick stop after the pharmacy," Jackson admitted, blushing slightly. "I just needed something tangible, something to make this real." During dinner, Jackson couldn't stop looking at Amanda's still flat belly. Every few minutes his eyes would drift in that direction as if he were trying to detect invisible changes. "May I?" he asked hesitantly, extending his hand. "Jackson, there's nothing to feel yet," Amanda laughed. "The baby is the size of a poppy seed." "I know," he said, "but our child is in there, even if it's just a poppy seed." Amanda guided his hand to her belly, and Jackson pressed it against her skin with a reverence that moved her. The man who had once been afraid of touching her inappropriately now caressed her belly as if he were holding the most precious miracle in the world. "Hi, baby," Jackson whispered, his voice broken with emotion. "I'm your daddy. I'm still learning how to be a good husband to your mommy, but I promise I'll learn to be a good father to you too." Amanda felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the man who had transformed so much in recent months, not just from distant husband to attentive lover, but now preparing to become a father. "You're going to be a wonderful father," she said with absolute certainty. "How can you be so sure?" Jackson asked, but there was hope in his voice. "Because you dedicate yourself completely to everything you love," Amanda replied, "and you already love this baby. I can see it in your eyes." Jackson kissed her belly softly before rising to kiss her lips. "I love you both," he whispered, "more than I knew it was possible to love." Later that night, as Jackson fell asleep with one hand protectively resting on her belly, Amanda reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. They had started as two polite strangers sharing a house, learned to become passionate lovers, and now were about to become a family. The man sleeping beside her wasn't the same one who had married her 2 years before. This Jackson was vulnerable, caring, passionate, and now about to be a father. And she couldn't wait to discover what kind of father he would become. The question that had haunted her for so long, whether they could build true love together, had been answered more beautifully than she had ever imagined. They hadn't just found love, they had created new life as a result of that love. And as a tiny life grew inside her, Amanda knew the best was yet to come. Charlotte's soft cry echoed through the room at 3 in the morning, but before Amanda could move, Jackson was already on his feet, walking toward the crib with the grace of someone who had mastered the art of being a father in the past 6 weeks. "Shh, my princess," he whispered, lifting the small pink bundle into his arms. "Daddy's here." Amanda watched from the comfort of the bed, still amazed by the complete transformation of the man she had married. This Jackson, devoted father, passionate husband, fierce protector of his small family, seemed born for this role, though she knew how much work it had taken to get here. "Is she hungry?" Amanda asked, preparing to get up. "No," Jackson murmured, gently rocking Charlotte. "I think she just wanted company. Do you want Daddy to sing to you, little one?" And then Jackson did something that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. He began singing a lullaby with his low, caring voice, completely without embarrassment, completely surrendered to the moment of intimacy with his daughter. Amanda leaned back against the pillows, watching the man who had learned not just to love, but to love completely, without reservations, without fear, without the barriers that had once defined him. Charlotte calmed almost immediately, tiny fists relaxing as she snuggled against her father's chest. "She adores you," Amanda whispered. "The feeling is mutual," Jackson replied, kissing Charlotte's small, perfect head. "I can't believe we made this, that we made her." The past 9 months had been a journey of discoveries. Jackson had approached impending fatherhood with the same meticulous dedication he had applied to learning intimacy, reading books, taking classes, researching everything about child development and baby care. But unlike his initial approach to marriage, he hadn't maintained emotional distance. On the contrary, he had completely surrendered to the experience of becoming a father, talking to Amanda's belly every night, singing to the unborn baby, assembling the crib with his own hands as if building a temple. "Remember when you said you didn't know how to be different from what you were?" Amanda asked softly. Jackson looked at her over Charlotte's head, a smile touching his lips. "That feels like another lifetime." "You didn't change who you were," Amanda said. "You just learned to be who you always were, without fear." Jackson returned Charlotte to the crib, covering her with the pink blanket her maternal grandmother had knitted. Then he joined Amanda in bed, pulling her into his arms, with the naturalness of someone who had done this thousands of times. "Amanda," he said, his voice loaded with emotion, "thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For teaching me that love doesn't need to be distant to be respectful. For showing me I could want you without feeling guilty." He paused, kissing the top of her head. "For giving me Charlotte, for giving me a family." Amanda nestled closer to him, breathing in the scent that had become synonymous with home. Jackson mixed with the soft smell of baby powder. "You gave me a family too, and you gave me the husband I always dreamed of having. Even though it took me 2 years to figure out how to be that husband?" "Especially because it took 2 years," Amanda said. "Anyone can be passionate at the beginning, but learning to love, choosing to grow together, that's rare." Jackson was silent for a moment, processing her words. "Sometimes I wonder who I would be if I hadn't married you, if you hadn't had patience with me." "You would have been a good man anyway," Amanda said with certainty, "but maybe a lonely man, and I would have been a woman who gave up too early on something worth fighting for." A small, satisfied sigh came from the crib, and both smiled in the darkness. Charlotte had settled completely, lost in baby dreams. "She'll have what we didn't have," Jackson said softly. "She'll grow up seeing that love can be passionate and stable at the same time. That intimacy is something beautiful, not something to be ashamed of. She'll grow up seeing a father who isn't afraid to show affection," Amanda added, "and a mother who knows she deserves to be loved completely." Jackson kissed her, a slow kiss full of promises. "I love you, Amanda. I love what we built together. I love who I became by loving you." "I love you too," she whispered back. "The man you were, the man you became, and the man you'll still become." While the world slept around them, Amanda reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. They had started as 2 polite strangers trying to make a marriage work. They had gone through months of loneliness and misunderstanding. They had faced the possibility that maybe they weren't compatible in the ways that mattered, but they had chosen to fight. They had chosen to be vulnerable. They had chosen to learn together instead of giving up separately. And now they had this, a daughter sleeping peacefully a few feet away, a love that had deepened through the years instead of diminishing, and the certainty that they had built something solid and true. Jackson fell asleep first, as he always did, but now his hand rested possessively on her waist even in sleep. No longer the respectful distance of years ago, but the natural closeness of 2 bodies that had learned to move as one. Amanda stayed awake for a few more minutes, listening to the synchronized breathing of her husband and daughter, 2 of the most comforting sounds in the world. She had everything she had dreamed of, and much more than she had dared to hope for. The silence that had once been a source of pain between them was now a silence of contentment. No longer the silence of distance, but the silence of mutual understanding, of love that didn't need words to be communicated. And as Amanda finally surrendered to sleep, One last question floated through her mind. Not a tormenting question this time, but a question full of possibilities. What other wonders awaited them in the years to come? Because if there was one thing she had learned on this journey, it was that true love never stops growing. It just finds new ways to flourish. And Jackson had become a master at making their love flourish in ways she had never imagined possible. Amanda and Jackson proved that true love isn't born ready-made. It's built, brick by brick, touch by touch, vulnerability by vulnerability. He learned that intimacy isn't weakness. She discovered that patience can be the most powerful form of love. And Charlotte was born not just from the love they shared, but from the love they chose to create together. Sometimes, the best marriages don't begin with overwhelming passion. They begin with two people willing to learn how to truly love each other. And you? Do you believe that love can be taught, or does it need to be born ready? If this story touched you and lit up your heart, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Your support is what allows us to keep bringing you stories like this, and if it was worth listening to, leave your totally worth it below.